The Cincinnati Bengals closed out their third preseason game with a tough loss to the Indianapolis Colts, 41-14. On the surface, there weren't many positives to grab from this one. But preseason games are always about more than the final score. They're about depth, roster battles, and giving the coaches one last look at players fighting for a spot on the 53-man roster. Now, before we dive deeper into what really stood out from this game, make sure you subscribe to the channel, drop a like, and hit the bell icon so you never miss the latest Bengals updates. We've got more breakdowns, roster news, and injury updates coming your way. Let's move on to the new news. One of the biggest storylines coming out of this matchup was the injury to wide receiver Jermaine Burton. While returning a punt, he appeared to roll his right ankle and had to leave the game. This is especially tough timing for Burton, who's been battling to earn a roster spot, with other names like Mitchell Tinsley and Isaiah Williams pushing hard. Every rep matters. Burton has shown flashes, but missing last week due to injury, and now leaving this game early puts him in a difficult position as final cuts approach. For a player trying to change the narrative around his career and prove he belongs in Cincinnati, this setback couldn't have come at a worse time. The team and fans will now be waiting anxiously for an update on the severity of that ankle injury. Another tough moment for Cincinnati came when Dejon Anthony left the field early with what looked like a right leg injury. At first, it wasn't clear if it was his hamstring or knee, but after a trip to the medical tent, he walked slowly to the locker room and didn't return. For a player battling in a crowded safety room, this is a concerning development. While he may still have a chance to secure a role because of his value on defense and special teams, this setback certainly complicates his situation. Later in the fourth quarter, offensive lineman Caleb Etienne also went down, clutching his left ankle. Trainers worked on him immediately, but the timing couldn't have been worse. He was getting valuable reps, yet he already faced an uphill climb to crack the 53-man roster. This injury likely pushes him even further behind in the competition. Looking beyond the injuries, the overall performance of the team was tough to watch. With no starters and only a handful of second-teamers on the field, most of the snaps went to the third and fourth string units. The struggles were obvious. Cincinnati converted just one of 10 third down attempts, and that lone conversion came late in the fourth quarter when the game was already decided. Defensively, things weren't much better. The Bengals gave up nearly 500 total yards, a number that highlights just how much work still needs to be done with depth players. It was one of those preseason games that tested the patience of both coaches and fans from start to finish. Even though it was mostly backups on the field, the numbers were hard to stomach. Cincinnati's defense surrendered 473 total yards, and it felt like every small victory turned into a mistake almost instantly. Take the play from Howard Cross 3. He made a great read, came up with an interception, but then coughed up the ball right after. That sequence summed up the night. Whenever something positive happened, it was quickly erased by a costly error. To make matters worse, it wasn't a star quarterback carving up the defense. It was the Colts' fourth stringer, Jason Bean, who threw for 107 yards with a touchdown. The interception he tossed should have been a big momentum shift for the Bengals, but instead, it became another wasted opportunity. That's the kind of thing that makes preseason film sessions so frustrating for a coaching staff. One of the more surprising takeaways was seeing McKinley Jackson playing late into the game. For a player drafted inside the top 100, that usually raises some eyebrows. Late preseason reps often go to fringe roster players, not rookies the team invested serious draft capital in. Jackson did manage to rack up 5 tackles, but the fact that he was still out there deep in the fourth quarter left plenty of questions. Was it simply about conditioning, or are the coaches looking for more out of him before the regular season kicks off? Either way, it was another storyline in a night full of concerns for Cincinnati. One bright spot from this preseason has been Howard Cross 3. He's quietly put together one of the most consistent stretches of play on the defensive line. And honestly, he's made more impact plays than rookie McKinley Jackson so far. Cross has shown he can disrupt passing lanes, create pressure, and get his hands on the football. something coaches value in rotational linemen. Because of that steady performance, he's given himself a legitimate chance to earn a spot on the 53-man roster. It's never guaranteed when final cuts roll around, but if your stacking resumes, Cross has done enough to put himself in a strong position. As for Jackson, his situation still feels a bit unclear. The talent is obvious, and the team spent real draft capital on him, but the decision to play him late into the third preseason game raised questions. Tuesday's roster deadline will provide the final word, and that could be one of the more intriguing choices for the Bengals front office to make. One of the more telling signs from this preseason finale wasn't just who played, but who didn't. Wide receiver Mitchell Tinsley and running back Taj Brooks were both held out of the game, and that usually speaks volumes. When players on the roster bubble sit in the final preseason matchup, it often means the coaches already consider them safe. For Brooks, it's not much of a surprise. He's looked steady as the RB3 behind Chase Brown and Samaje Perine all preseason, and his role feels secure. Tinsley, though, has been one of the real eye-openers. He went off last week, making plays that turned heads and even earned some first-team reps with Joe Burrow in practice. His growth and production make him one of the most intriguing names heading into roster cut day. Meanwhile, other depth players like Gary Brightwell and Kendall Milton also put together strong performances this preseason, making the backfield picture even more interesting. But the decision to keep Tinsley and Brooks on the sideline in this Colts game looks like a clear indicator. Both have likely done enough to secure their roster spots. Let's talk quarterbacks, because this might have been the ugliest part of the night. Peyton Thorne finally got his preseason snaps, and it was rough from start to finish. He struggled with accuracy, decision-making, and rhythm. Honestly, he looked even shakier than Desmond Ridder, who himself had a tough outing, going just 8 for 20 with a brutal interception and only 75 passing yards. If there was any question about a QB2 competition, there isn't any more. Jake Browning is clearly locked in behind Joe Burrow, and after that, things fall off fast. Both Ridder and Thorne have shown they aren't reliable enough if disaster were ever to strike. That lack of depth is a real concern for Cincinnati heading into the season. But the biggest takeaway, the preseason is over, and not a moment too soon. These last few games have been hard to watch, with defenses giving up nearly 500 yards and the offense stuck in neutral. Yes, most of it came against backups and fringe players, but the fact remains. The Bengals can't afford a slow start when the real games begin. That opener against Joe Flacco and the Colts will be the first true test. The defense needs Trey Hendrickson back on the field. The offense needs to settle in behind Burrow. And Cincinnati has to flip the switch from preseason struggles to regular season urgency. Because once the whistle blows in week 1, there are no more excuses. The Bengals now turn the page to week 1 against the Cleveland Browns. The focus shifts away from these frustrating preseason performances and squarely onto the real challenge ahead. Getting key veterans like Geno Stone and B.J. Hill back into the defensive rotation will be critical, as this unit has to tighten up quickly before facing Cleveland's offense. At the same time, the front office faces tough decisions with roster cutdowns looming. The 53-man roster must be finalized by Tuesday at 4 p.m. And this game gave coaches their final look at who's earned a spot. For some bubble players, this weekend may have sealed their fate, either in Cincinnati or somewhere else. The preseason might have ended on a sour note, but the real story begins now. The Bengals have 1 week to regroup, get healthy, and prepare to prove that this roster is built to contend from the very first snap of the regular season.